Hi, this is James Gordon here with another horror anthology for October Terror, the anthology we're talking about today. The Masters of Horror and Supernatural, The Great Tales, compiled by Bill Ponzanzi, Barry N. Mazeberg, and Martin H. Greenberg. This was first published by Galahad Books in 1981. This edition from Bristol Park Books was reprinted in 2010. This was not a really good anthology. Despite having 3 good stories with 1 decent one, I was not really impressed with it. This was kind of like the same issue I had with Dark Forces anthology, where a lot of the stories I felt didn't fit the horror theme, and others really felt out of place. Well, that anthology had only 1 decent story. This one at least had 3 good stories with 1 okay story. So for this review, I'm only going to cover the 2 obscure short stories, which are very difficult to find. The other story that I like by H.P. Lovecraft, I'm going to save that for a collection of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft instead, as I felt it would be better to cover that story in the collection of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft rather than having to read it twice with this anthology and then later the H.P. Lovecraft anthology. But the 2 stories that I'm going to be covering today are Sticks by Karl Edward Wagner and The Crate by Stephen King. I'll explain more about this anthology after my review, and spoiler alert, I will give away crucial details within the short stories. Alright, on to the review. Sticks by Karl Edward Wagner. In the spring of 1942, Colin Leverett, an artist, is on a fishing trip in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. Colin also brought his art supplies, taking any moment to sketch anything he sees. While trying to catch a fish, Colin notices a sign almost hidden by plant growth. Upon investigating, it reads, "No trespassing." Puzzled by this, as he knows there isn't any private property around here. Colin goes through the gate and travels through the forest and finds a stone bridge. He also notices strange sticks around the area. He then finds an abandoned house in decay along with plant growth on it, and is surrounded by strange stick formations. He enters inside and explores it, finding nothing but more of the strange sticks. Upon entering the cellar, it's very large and dark inside, with only beams of light shining through the cracks. As he explores, Colin is attacked by a lynch, an undead creature. He strikes it with his carving knife and flees the house. A few years after World War II, Colin works as an illustrator for pulp novels and magazines. However, he is unable to forget about those strange sticks. He sketches them and later does paintings, which he tries to sell them but is rejected for how graphic and grotesque. Feeling his luck has ran out, Colin receives a letter from Gothic House, a small printing press. Scotty Brandon, the head publisher, wants him to work on a deluxe book set for the famed horror author H. Kenneth Allard, who's retired and wishes to make a fortune with his beloved work. He is offering a lot of money for this work. Colin accepts, but what he's requested to draw is too simple. Looking through his old sketchbooks, he finds the one with the sticks and adds them to the illustrations. While Scotty is impressed with Colin's work but finds the sticks uneasy to look at. Then Colin meets Dana Allard, a relative of Kenneth, who's both impressed with the illustrations and wants to know where he discovered these sticks. Colin explains to Allard where he found them, then writes a letter to Scotty. One of his friends does research and discovers the house was used for black magic and the sticks are linked to the cult. Then his friend and Scotty are murdered. Realizing the danger these sticks are causing, Colin fears what would happen when people go to read those stories and see the illustrations. He drives to Kenneth's house and finds Allard waiting for him. He takes Colin to the attic where he has stored the finished books, and they'll be available for purchase soon. As Colin tries to explain to Allard the danger the sticks pose, to his horror, Allard reveals he plans on awakening the great old ones to reclaim Earth and turn the readers into their slaves. While his uncle won't live to see this, but is looking forward to serving his master. Colin attempts to stop Allard, but is pulled by shadowy forces along with the sticks. He screams as Allard grins at him. The Crate by Stephen King. Dexter Stanley, biological professor for Forlicks University, pulls into the driveway of his good friend and English professor, Henry Northup, getting out of his MG Roadster and runs towards the front door holding down the doorbell. When Henry answers the door, he sees Dexter is terrified and is unable to understand what he's saying. Henry brings Dexter inside and asks if Henry's wife Wilma is here. Henry replies she left for her classes. Dexter wants a drink. Henry brings Dexter into his study and gives him a glass of scotch. Dexter sits down, drinks his glass, and begins telling Henry what happened. Earlier that day, Dexter attending a party at Forlicks University when he gets a call from a janitor who found a crate under the basement stairs. At first, Dexter thinks it's filled with National Geographic magazines, but the janitor adds the crate has a date on it, an Arctic Expedition 1834. Dexter, now curious, leaves the party and goes to visit the janitor. He explains he discovered it while he went to flip a quarter on buffering the floor or clean the windows and didn't catch it. It then rolled under the stairs where he first saw the crate. Dexter notices the layers of dust on the crate means it's very old. Both men carry it out and bring it into a laboratory. The janitor gets a hammer and chisel as they work on getting the crate open. As Dexter is in the middle of prying off the nails, they hear a whistling sound. The janitor looks inside the crate and his arm is suddenly pulled into the opening and screams. Blood splatters out as Dexter tries to save the janitor, but watches in horror as his body is pulled inside the crate with limbs being dismembered, then seeing an arm reaching for each limb and eating it. Dexter runs out of the laboratory and bumps into Charlie Garrison, a grad student. Dexter tries to explain what happened to Charlie, but thinks he's gone insane. However, Charlie goes downstairs to see the bloody mess inside the laboratory. He now believes Dexter's story, but they notice the crate is gone. Following the blood trail, it has brought itself under the basement stairs. Charlie sees the janitor's shoe and wants to reach for it to study the bite mark. Suddenly, the creature appears and grabs Charlie. Dexter sees it has 6 legs with the head of a lynx and has gold eyes like an owl and covered in fur. Dexter tries to save Charlie, but he is pulled away and is eaten away. Henry is both shocked and amazed by the story. Dexter wants to go home before Wilma returns back. Henry agrees to drive him back after one more drink. Henry slips in sleeping powder into Dexter's drink and waits for him to pass out. Henry carries him into bed, then writes a note to his wife and leaves. For years, Wilma, or as she likes to be called, Billy, has abused and controlled her husband, scolding him and claims he's weak. Henry felt there was no escape until Dexter told him about the creature in the crate, which he plans to murder her. Henry drives to Forlicks University in Dexter's car. Once there, Henry goes to the janitor's closet and takes a mop and gloves and begins cleaning up the bloody mess. Once Wilma shows up, Henry brings her downstairs but begins laughing, with Wilma becoming annoyed with him, not finding this funny. Henry explains that Dexter got physical with a woman and she hid under the stairs and won't come out. Wilma goes to check under the stairs. Henry then pushes her towards the crate. She yells at him to stop when the creature appears. Wilma tries to break free, but Henry pushes her towards the crate. The creature grabs her and begins eating her. He then cleans up the mess, then carefully chains the crate down and uses Wilma's International Scout and drives over to Ryder's quarry, dumping the crate into the dark water below. Dexter awakens and finds he's still at Henry's house. When Henry returns, he explains what he did and states there is no evidence of the murders even happening, and since the university is closed with no witnesses, nobody would believe them. They agreed not to tell anyone, as Dexter says, after all, what our friends are for. Masters of Horror and Supernatural, The Great Tales wasn't a good anthology. Despite having 2 obscure short stories that are very difficult to find and a good H.P. Lovecraft story, however, the rest of it I didn't like. It's almost like the same issue I had with Dark Forces anthology, with some stories not fitting the horror theme, with some of them feel more like crime, murder mysteries, and one short story, The Party, by William F. Nolan, felt more like an episode of The Twilight Zone. I'll start with the stories I didn't like. Most were difficult to understand what was going on, or I didn't like how they were written, or as I said earlier, didn't fit the theme of this anthology. A couple of times I skipped a story, finding it boring or not enjoying it. Wasn't impressed with some of the stories that were chosen and wish the people who put this anthology together picked better written stories that fit the theme of horror. The best stories were Styx and The Crate. Both were very creative and fun to read. And The Crate was featured in the 1982 horror anthology film Creepshow, directed by George Romero, who does a very good job on the story and found it better, along with added dark humor and gore and creature effects by Tom Savini. If it wasn't for these two obscure short stories, I would have disregarded this anthology, as there wasn't anything else I liked about it. While some might enjoy this horror anthology more than I did, but if you're looking to read Stephen King's The Crate or Karl Edward Wrangler's Sticks, then this is the only anthology I know that has both stories. But do some research on where else you might be able to find these short stories before wanting to check out this massive anthology first. If it had more better written stories, I would have enjoyed this anthology more. At least it didn't kill my mood for horror unlike Dark Forces. At least this was decent. Alright, that's our review today. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, out of all these short stories I read, only two of them I really liked the most, and the rest I really did not like at all. As I said, some of the stories I felt did not fit the theme of horror. They felt more like crime, murder mysteries, or like just more kind of like fantasy-like stories. For example, The Party by William F. Nolan. It was okay story, but as I said, it didn't really fit the theme of the anthology. It felt more like a kind of like fantasy supernatural story about a guy goes to a party, and when he gets there, he goes down through an elevator, and he meets a bunch of weird and strange people, and then as the party goes on, more people are showing up, and the people are really getting weird and strange, and the main character decides he's had enough, but he begins to notice that that some people in the party that he heard that were killed in like accidents or shootings, and then when he goes to leave the party, he is shocked to see one of his friends are there who he died of some accident. And his friend wants him to stay, but he tries to leave. However, the elevator doesn't have a up button; it only has a down button. So I thought this was okay, but if that story should have went into like an anthology that has more like Twilight themed episodes, or like or just like dark fantasy stuff. So that's what I felt that story should have been, and not a horror anthology. There was one short story I thought was the Fly, which is what the two films that are based on it. The one I know is the one directed by David Cronenberg, but when I looked up the author's name, it was a completely different story, just with the same name. It had nothing to do with the one that's based on the movie, so I was really let down by that. And just the rest of the stories I really didn't like at all. As I said, I found a lot of them not really good, boring, or kind of difficult to understand. With some I just skipped because I just wasn't enjoying it. So that was the negative things with this anthology. Like this thing is thick. This is like, how long is this? This anthology is 573 pages long. This has got a lot of stories in it. I wish it had more better ones. But anyway, I'll move on to the two stories I'm going to be talking about today. I'll start with the Sticks by Karl Edward Wrangler. This is a really a really fun, creative, scary story about a guy that's out fishing out in the wilderness, and he discovers this abandoned house, and he finds it has these strange stick figures around it, and then when he goes inside, he's attacked by a like undead creature, and he's able to kill it, and he flees, and then he's years later he's unable to get what he saw out of his head, so he begins like drawing it and then painting and tries to sell his creations, but people reject it because they find it too grotesque and disturbing to look at. And just when you think his luck has ran out, he's then hired by a publisher to do illustrations for a collection of short stories by a very well-known horror writer who I read apparently was based off of H.P. Lovecraft. So he's thrilled about this, but when he's told what he has to draw, it's like, this is the same typical thing I've drawn before. I want to make this special because in the short story, the stories he's illustrating is one of his favorite horror writers. So he wants to make this very special. And when he discovers the sketches he did of the mysterious sticks he saw, he decided, I'm going to incorporate that into the illustrations, which leads to a whole like supernatural element where the guy gets involved in like a cult that worships the great old ones, and a bunch of things start happening. And I really like the story. This was a really good story. I actually first discovered this short story from a band that I like, of Skinny Puppy. On their one album, they got a song. What's it called? Shit, what's that? Hold on a minute. What's that song called? Here it is. Okay. So the Skinny Puppy album is mine, the Placental Intercourse. The song Stairs and the Flowers is based on the short story of Styx, which is where I first discovered this story. And I was like, this. And when I looked up the short story on Wiki, I was like, this sounds really interesting. However, the author's work has been out of print for a very long time. And I would be nice if Karl Edward Wagner's work got reprinted to make it more easier for people like me to read his work and stuff. The short story Styx was very difficult to find, and I had a very hard time trying to find anthologies that had a short story. And then one day, I was at a village, and I happened to find this anthology which had that short story in it. And then I was also surprised to find The Crate, which is another difficult short story to find as well. But so I was glad I was able to read this short story. I really liked it. I felt it was very creative, dark, and definitely had some really eerie moments in it. And plus the ending I really love, where where the whole supernatural element just kicks in. I really enjoyed it. I definitely like to check out more work by Karl Edward Wagner. I really liked his writing style. The detail was really good in it. I'm surprised this short story hasn't been made to a film. However, I've read that his short story Styx has been a major influence to like horror films such as the Blair Witch Project and some other ones. So at least the story has served inspiration for other horror writers and filmmakers and stuff. And the second short story that I really liked was The Crate. This is another short story I want to read for a very long time after I've seen Creepshow so many times. That is one of my favorite horror film anthologies. I really love the story, the stories in it, the writing, the actors, everything about that movie is just, everything is done perfectly. To me, that anthology film has like the best short stories ever, and I don't think there's a single stinker in any of them. They're all good, fun stories. They're both like, scary and frightening, and also funny at the same time, which I really enjoy. The short story Crate, I've always been curious what this one's about, and as I said, when I found this anthology and when I saw I had The Crate, I thought I got to get this because I do not know where else you can find this short story. As The Crate and Weeds is another short story by Stephen King, which is very difficult to find. I have done some research and I saw that Weeds and Crate have been reprinted in a couple anthologies, but yeah, they're very difficult stories to find. I wish King would have like all his like short stories in like in like one collection. You could read them all. That would be great if he did that. But anyway, I am hoping one day to find an anthology with Weeds. I can read that one because that was another short story. That was another story I liked from Creepshow. But anyway, The Crate is a really good story. To me, this is just like a very fun one. Basically, it actually starts out differently than I remember from the film. I thought the short story was going to be similar to the film, but it's kind of somewhat the same but different. It's mostly told through flashback, and the perspective switches between Dexter and Henry as the two main characters. So the story starts off with Dexter showing up at Henry's house unannounced, and he's absolutely terrified. And then when Henry sees him, he sees that he's horrified about something. He brings him inside, and Henry cannot make sense what Dexter is saying. He's like mumbling to himself, and he's speaking so fast. And then after Henry calms him down, he explains that this janitor at this university discovered this mysterious crate under the basement stairs, and they went to investigate it, and there was this creature inside from an Antarctic expedition, and this thing just eats everything. It eats both body parts and clothing, and she was like, this thing devours everything in its path. So then, after Dexter tells Henry his story, Henry sees this as an opportunity to get rid of his annoying wife, Billy, who's a real bitch in the story, and in the film she's even more annoying. So Henry decides that he's going to get rid of his wife, and this is the perfect way because there won't be any evidence to link them to the crime. There's no body parts that will left behind nothing. It's it's the perfect murder essentially. So after Henry knocks out his friend Dexter, he takes his card, goes to the university, cleans up the bloody mess, and leaves the note for his wife to find, and then he sets up this elaborate trap for her. When Wilma shows up, Henry is trying not to laugh, and he can't help it, and his wife's like, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. And so he's trying to compose himself, and then he brings her to the basement stairs, and he literally like shoves her towards this crate, and she's like freaking out on him, and And he's like, yeah, scream all you want. No one can hear you. And he's just going on and on. And then when the creature appears, she tries to break free. And Harry just keeps pushing her towards the crate until the creature gets her, which I thought was a lot more darker than the film, as they kind of changed it where Harry breaks through the crate and he's like, have her pound against the crate, but nothing happens. And he's like, why did the thing not come out? And then, of course, she starts doing her usual shtick where she starts scolding him and insulting him, and he's just staring at her with this, like, pissed-off expression. And then, as she's, like, raising her voice, the creature then finally appears and then grabs her. And actually, when the creature sees Wilma for the first time, it's actually, attracted to her and gives her, like, a sort of, like, kiss/bite to her face in the film, which I thought was fine. But in the short story, it's a lot more dark, where he's like literally shoving her towards the crate, trying to get the creature to come out to eat her. But I really enjoyed this short story. This was a lot of fun. It did have some dark humor in it, and I'm so glad I got the adaptation in Creepshow. It was just that's one of my favorite short stories. I also liked in the film how they added where the main character Henry is a vision killing his wife, which was a lot of fun. That was in the short story, and the film kind of while the short story gives a little backstory on Henry marrying Wilma and how the marriage kind of basically was a living hell for him, the movie doesn't really explain that. It's just basically you got like kind of like this middle-aged man with this bitchy wife that he wants to get rid of so badly. Now he's envisioning of killing her. Which I liked that touch. But I wouldn't want like a detailed backstory in that film anyway. They're supposed to be like fun, short horror stories, just meant for fun, not something to be taken serious. So yeah, so those were the two short stories I really enjoyed. As I said, this is the only anthology I know that has these two short stories together. So if you're looking to read this, then this is the anthology I would recommend. But as I said, do some research on where else you might be able to find these short stories. I'm sure there are other horror anthologies you can find. This is the only one that I know that has the two together in them. There is a website I do use that I've tracked down other anthologies that have short stories and books and stuff. So I'll provide a link to that site. So if you want to try to I'll provide a link to this site, as you can find like short stories and books to find like other editions and stuff, which I found this site very useful and very helpful. Yeah, so overall this anthology, it was okay. It could have been better, so I'm hoping to get some much better horror collection anthologies on this channel before October is over. Alright, that's for the book review today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to October Library, the YouTube channel where I post book reviews, book hauls, and our fictional content. Until then, I'll catch you later.